She had rehearsed this moment 100 times. What she would say, how she would say it, the exact tone that would make it clean, no mess, no tears. She had even chosen the restaurant. Neutral ground, public enough that neither of them would fall apart. But Shin Hyun-jae didn't wait for the restaurant. He showed up at her door at 11 at night with a single white peony, her favorite, which she had never told him, and eyes that already knew something was wrong. He stood in her doorway, took one look at her face, and said, "Whatever you're about to say, don't." And Grace Obi, who had survived an abortion at 21, a post-diagnosis delivered in an empty clinic room, and a uterine scarring report she'd read alone in a hospital corridor, Grace Obi, who never broke in public, felt her throat close. Because she was about to destroy the best thing that had ever made the mistake of loving her. "I can't have kids," she whispered. The peony was still in his hand. He hadn't moved, hadn't flinched. The silence between them was the loudest thing she had ever heard. And then he said one word that she would turn over in her mind for the rest of her life, wondering if it saved her or simply pulled her deeper into a world she was never meant to survive. Welcome to Afro-Korean Love Stories. In today's episode, we bring you silent pain, true love, fated encounters, worlds collision, and romance. If you're just joining us for the first time, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on your notification bell so you don't miss out on new story drops. Let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to see how far these amazing stories have traveled. Now hold on to your seats as we take a deep dive into this amazing story. Her name was Grace Obi, and she had built her entire life around the art of being fine. Fine was safe. Fine kept people from asking questions she didn't want to answer. Fine was the smile she had perfected at 21, sitting in a clinic in Lagos, signing paperwork for a procedure she had agreed to because the man sitting outside in the waiting room had looked at her with those tired eyes and said, "I'm not ready, Grace. I'm just not ready." She had nodded. She had been fine. She found out about the PCOS 3 weeks later. A routine post-procedure checkup. The doctor had said the words carefully, the way doctors do when they're not sure how much a patient can absorb in one sitting. Polycystic ovary syndrome. Likely present for years. The irregular cycles Grace had always blamed on exam stress. The fatigue. All of it, not stress. Her own body, quietly working against her. The man who wasn't ready never knew. She never told him. There was no point. He had already moved on by then. So had she. Technically, medicine became everything. 6 years of becoming someone who fixed other people because she had run out of things to fix in herself. She was brilliant at it. Focused in a way that her colleagues mistook for ambition. It wasn't ambition. It was occupation. Keep moving. Keep working. If you stop, you feel it. The transfer to Seoul General came in the spring. Prestigious. Competitive. Exactly the kind of opportunity that doesn't leave room for hesitation. She packed 2 suitcases, said goodbye to her mother, and boarded a flight to a city where nobody knew her name. 3 months in, she had found her rhythm. A small apartment in Mapogu. A coffee place 2 blocks from the hospital that made something close enough to strong Lagos coffee that she had stopped grieving the real thing. Colleagues who were warm once they trusted you. A language she was slowly, stubbornly learning. She had almost started to feel like a person again. Then the results came back. She had requested the full gynecological workup herself. Routine. She was a doctor. She knew what the pros meant long-term. She knew the questions to ask. She knew the tests to run. She had been waiting 2 weeks for the report with the practiced attachment of someone who had already emotionally prepared for bad news. Asherman syndrome. Intrauterine adhesions. Significant scarring of the uterine cavity. Most likely a consequence of the procedure 6 years ago, compounded by the hormonal complications from the PCOS. The chances of carrying a pregnancy to term low. Significantly low. She read it once. Then again. Then she folded the paper, slid it into her coat pocket, and walked out of the consultation room into the corridor. She needed 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds to breathe before she went back to being fine. That was when she heard the footsteps. She heard him before she saw him. He was walking back from the gynecology wing, his younger sister beside him, talking at him the way younger siblings do, fast, annoyed, gesturing with both hands. He wasn't listening to a word she said. His eyes had already found Grace. She straightened, slid the report deeper into her pocket, arranged her face. "Dr. Obi." His Korean was precise. Everything about him was precise. Tall, dark-suited. Mr. Shin, she said.
Warm.
Professional. How did Ji-Eun's consultation go? Fine, Ji-Eun said, rolling her eyes. He made them repeat everything twice. I asked for clarification, Hyunjae said, without looking away from Grace. Ji-Eun muttered something in Korean that Grace's 3 months of vocabulary wasn't equipped to decode. Probably unflattering. The hormonal panel result should be ready by Thursday, Grace said. Dr. Yoon will call you directly. But everything looks manageable. Nothing to worry about. I'm not worried about Ji-Eun, he said.
A beat.
Are you alright? The question landed so quietly it almost didn't register. Grace blinked. Her smile didn't waver. Of course. Long afternoon. He looked at her for exactly 1 second longer than necessary. Then he nodded once and guided his sister toward the exit. Grace watched them go. Exhaled once. Went back to being fine. He came back on Thursday. Ji-Eun's results were ready. Dr. Yoon's office was on the 4th floor. Grace's department was on the 2nd. There was no logical reason for Shin Hyunjae to pass through her corridor on his way in or out. He passed through anyway. Dr. Obi. Mr. Shin. He paused. Looked at her the way he always did. You look better today, he said. I wasn't unwell before. I know, he said, and walked on. It became a pattern. Every visit, and there were several because Ji-Eun's hormonal monitoring ran across 6 weeks, he found a reason to stop. Never long. Never inappropriate. Just present in a way Grace didn't have a category for. He brought her coffee once, the strong kind, the kind that tasted nothing like hospital vending machine coffee, and set it on the nurse's station counter nearest to her without a word, as if he'd simply forgotten it there. She drank it. Didn't mention it. He smiled.
Just barely.
You're not from Seoul, he said one afternoon, leaning against the wall outside her consultation room while she reviewed a chart. Observant, she said, without looking up. Lagos. She looked up.
How?
The way you say certain words. You're expressive. And you argue with the coffee machine every time like it owes you something. Grace stared at him. Nigerian doctors are the best in this hospital, he said simply. Then he pushed off the wall and left. She told herself it was nothing. Powerful men were charming when they chose to be. It was a tool like any other. She had seen it before. She knew exactly what it looked like and exactly how to remain unaffected by it. Except Shin Hyunjae wasn't performing charm. That was the problem. He wasn't saying the right things. He was saying the true things. Small, precise observations that told her he had been paying far closer attention than any corridor exchange warranted. He noticed she skipped lunch on heavy clinic days and started leaving food near her station, never directly, always plausibly accidental. He noticed she tensed slightly whenever the hospital intercom crackled unexpectedly, so he always waited for the silence before he spoke to her. He noticed everything. And Grace, who had spent 6 years making herself invisible to protect herself from exactly this kind of attention, felt herself being slowly, carefully seen. It terrified her. Because somewhere between the coffee and the way he said her, she had started watching the door, waiting for Thursday, waiting for him. And underneath all of it, tucked under a heap of medical files like a quiet bomb, the report she hadn't thrown away yet. The one that told her exactly why this, whatever this was becoming, could never be allowed to go anywhere. She just needed to remember that. The first time he asked her to dinner, she said no. Professionally, warmly, with a perfectly constructed excuse about early rounds and a research submission deadline that was technically true but had nothing to do with why she was refusing. He accepted it without argument. No pressure. No second push. Just a single nod and a quiet another time. She told herself she was relieved. The second time he asked, Ji-Eun's monitoring was complete. There was no more legitimate reason for him to be at Seoul General. Grace had half convinced herself that the visits would simply stop, that without the medical appointment as a framework, Shin Hyunjae would redirect his attention toward whatever empire required managing, and she would go back to being a foreign doctor in a city that didn't know her name. Instead, he called. Not a text. A call. At 7 in the evening, while she was sitting cross-legged on her apartment floor eating ramen straight from the pot because she hadn't bothered with a bowl. She stared at his name on the screen for 4 full rings. Hello. You haven't eaten properly, he said. No greeting. No preamble. Excuse me? I'm outside your building. There's a restaurant 2 streets down that makes jollof rice that won't hurt your taste buds. Come down. Grace looked at her Ramian, looked at the door, looked back at her Ramian. How do you know where I live? Don't worry about that, Grace. She was no longer Dr. OBI. First time he had used her first name. Just like that. Slipped it in like it had always belonged in his mouth. She went downstairs. Dinner was not what she expected. She had braced for performance. For the curated version of himself that powerful men deploy in restaurants. The carefully chosen wine, the subtle flexing of influence, the conversation designed to impress rather than connect. She had her armor ready. He talked about his sister. About how Jiyeon had been 13 when their mother died, and how he had raised her mostly through trial and error and sheer refusal to let anything else go wrong. About how she was studying architecture now and argued with him about everything, and was the only person on earth who could make him feel genuinely stupid in under 4 sentences. He said all of this looking directly at Grace, quietly, without performing vulnerability. Just stating facts about himself the way someone does when they've decided to let you in. Why are you telling me this? Grace asked. Because you never tell me anything. So, I'm going first. She looked at him across the table. This man. This still, controlled, dangerous man who had somehow learned which coffee she preferred and remembered that she laughed when she was caught off guard and was now sitting across from her talking about raising his teenage sister like it was the most natural thing in the world. I grew up in Lagos, she said. Slowly. Like she was testing how it felt to offer something real. Ikeja GRA. My mother taught secondary school English. My father was an engineer who treated every problem in life like it had a technical solution. Did it work? Sometimes. Not always. He nodded. Didn't push. That was the night Grace Obi made her first mistake. She let herself enjoy it. They fell into something neither of them named for weeks. Dinners that ran past midnight. Walks through Han River Park at hours when the city finally went quiet. Phone calls that started practical and ended nowhere near where they began. He sent her music, old Korean ballads with English translations typed out underneath, no explanation, just the lyrics landing in her messages at odd hours like something he'd been thinking about and couldn't keep to himself. She sent him back her Afrobeats playlists from artists he'd never heard of. He listened to every single one. Started referencing lyrics in conversation with the casual confidence of a man who had done his research thoroughly and wasn't going to pretend otherwise. He was learning her. She was letting him. And underneath every dinner, every late call, every moment, she caught herself smiling at her phone like a woman who had forgotten what she was protecting herself from. The report sat in her bedside drawer, moved there from underneath the pile of documents on a night she couldn't sleep. As if proximity to it while she dreamed would help her remember what she was supposed to do with it. She was supposed to end this. She knew exactly what Shin Hyun-jae was. Not just powerful, rooted. A man building something that was meant to last generations. She had heard enough, paid enough attention during his careful, deliberate self-disclosures to understand that legacy wasn't a concept to him. It was a mandate. The Shin name. The continuation of something. She could not give him that. Every time she rehearsed the conversation in her head, it ended the same way. She would tell him the truth. He would be gracious about it, because he was always gracious, and then he would redirect his life toward a woman whose body hadn't already made the decision for both of them. It was the logical conclusion, the only fair outcome. She just kept not doing it. Then one evening, everything shifted. They were in his apartment for the first time. She had agreed to dinner there because Jiyeon was visiting and had practically demanded Grace come, and it was impossible to say no to Jiyeon when she wanted something, a trait Grace suspected she had inherited from her brother. Jiyeon had fallen asleep on the couch mid-movie, wrapped in a blanket, entirely unbothered. Hyun-jae had turned the volume down without being asked. Grace was watching him do it, this small, careful gesture. This man who moved through the world like a verdict being quietly tender with his sleeping sister, and something in her chest came completely undone. He turned and caught her looking. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then he crossed the room, sat beside her, and took her hand. No speech. No declaration. Just his hand around hers, steady and certain, like a door closing on every exit she had been keeping open. Hyun-jae. Not tonight, he said quietly. Whatever it is. Not tonight. She looked at their hands, his thumb moving slowly across her knuckles. The city quiet outside the window. She nodded. Not tonight. But the morning always comes. Let's pause for a second, because I need you to sit with that for a second. Grace knew, the whole time, every dinner, every late-night call, every moment she let him take her hand, she knew what she was carrying, and she chose warmth over truth because for the first time in 6 years somebody was making her feel like she wasn't already broken. Tell me honestly, can you blame her? Have you ever held on to something beautiful just a little longer than you should have because letting go felt like losing the last good thing? Because Grace didn't just fall for Hyunjae. She fell for the version of herself that existed when she was around him. The one who laughed without planning it. The one who sent music at midnight and meant something by it. And she was about to burn all of it down with 4 words. Do you think Grace should have told him about her condition before things got any deeper? Do you think he deserved to know about an information this huge? Do you think he'd stay knowing the empire he wants to build has a 50-50 chance of ending with his bloodline? Are you in support of the way she's going about it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you're feeling this story in places you didn't expect, you're exactly where this story needs you to be. Hit that like button right now and subscribe if you're still yet to, because this next part is where everything breaks open, and you do not want to miss it. She chose a Sunday. Sundays felt merciful somehow.
Softer.
Like the day itself would absorb some of the damage. She had rehearsed it clean. 4 sentences. No elaboration, no backstory, no invitation for him to talk her out of it. Just the truth, stated clearly, followed by the logical conclusion she had been postponing for 3 months. She got through exactly 1 sentence. I need to tell you something I should have told you before any of this started. He was standing at his kitchen counter, making coffee, the strong kind, the kind he had learned she preferred, with his back to her. His hands didn't stop moving, but something in his shoulders changed. A barely perceptible shift. The kind of stillness that isn't relaxation. He knew something was coming. He turned around, leaned against the counter, crossed his arms, not defensively, just the way he arranged himself when he was preparing to receive something difficult. Gave her his full attention the way he always did, like nothing in the world existed outside of whatever she was about to say. That made it harder. I have PCOS, she said. I found out at 21, and I have Asherman syndrome, uterine scarring. Significant. The chances of me carrying a pregnancy to term are, she stopped. Steadied herself. Very low, realistically. The doctors have been honest with me about that. She kept going because stopping felt more dangerous. I know what you're building, Hyunjae. I know what the Shin name means to you. I know what you need, and I am telling you, honestly, clearly, that I cannot give you that. So whatever this is. She gestured vaguely at the space between them, at the coffee he'd made her, at the 3 months of Sundays and midnight music and his hand around hers. It has to stop here. Before it goes any further. Before either of us. Grace. Just her name. Quiet. Absolute.
She stopped.
He looked at her for a long moment. Not with pity. She would have walked out immediately if she had seen pity. Not with a careful diplomatic expression of a man preparing a gentle rejection. He looked at her the way he had looked at her that first day in the corridor, like he was reading something she hadn't offered to show him. Then he said, stay. 1 word. She blinked. Hyunjae. Stay, he repeated again. Same tone. Same certainty. Like it wasn't a request. Like it was simply the correct answer to a question the universe had been asking, and he was the only one paying enough attention to hear it. You're not listening to me, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. I just told you I can't give you children. I just told you. I heard you. He cut her off. Then you understand why. I understand that you've been carrying this alone since you were 21 years old, he said.
Calm.
Each word placed carefully, like he knew exactly how much weight they needed to carry. I understand that you rehearsed this conversation. I understand that you chose today because you thought it would be easier. And I understand that you are standing in my kitchen right now terrified, not because you want to leave, but because you've already decided you don't deserve to stay. Grace felt her throat tighten. She hated that. She had promised herself she wouldn't do this here. You don't know what you're saying, she said quietly. I know exactly what I'm saying. He pushed off the counter, crossed the kitchen toward her slowly, not rushing, never rushing, and stopped close enough that she had to tilt her head slightly to hold his gaze. I'm not 21. I'm not a boy who didn't understand your value and wasn't ready for commitment. I'm telling you, with full understanding of everything you just told me, stay. Legacy is not more important than you. She stared at him. The Shin name, she started, will survive, he said simply. Ji-yeon will probably have 4 children just to spite me. The name will survive. Despite everything, despite the tightness in her throat and the tears she was refusing to release and the 3 months of careful emotional architecture currently collapsing around her, Grace almost laughed. Almost. This isn't something you decide in a moment, she said. This is the rest of your life. I'm aware of how life works, Grace. I'm serious. So am I. He reached out and took her face in both hands, gently, completely, the way you hold something you have decided you are not going to lose. I have made decisions that affected thousands of people without losing a night of sleep. I think I can manage this one. She closed her eyes. Besides, there are options of adoption and medical technology is advancing steadily. His thumb moved across her cheekbone.
Slow.
Certain. You came here to end this, he said softly. And I'm telling you, you're not leaving. You're impossible, she whispered. Yes, he agreed. Completely unbothered. And then, for the first time since she was 21 years old, Grace Obi stopped being fine. She let the tears come. Right there in his kitchen, with his hands on her face and the coffee going cold on the counter, she cried the way people cry when they've been holding something for so long that the release feels less like sadness and more like putting down something enormously, unbearably heavy. He didn't say anything, didn't try to fix it, just held her face and let her feel it. All of it. The abortion and the diagnosis and the years of fine and the report she had read alone in a foreign corridor until there was nothing left to hold. Then he pressed his forehead to hers. I'm not going anywhere. Neither are you. She moved in stages. That was Grace's way. She didn't simply decide to be happy and become it overnight. She didn't wake up the morning after the kitchen and find that 6 years of carefully constructed self-protection had evaporated. It didn't work like that. She knew that. He knew that. So he waited. And he showed up. Every single day. Consistently, quietly, without demanding that she arrive faster than she was capable of arriving. That was how she knew it was real. The first thing she noticed was the mornings. She had always woken up braced. That low-level tension that had lived in her chest since she was 21. She had lived with it so long she had stopped recognizing it as anything other than her normal. 3 weeks after the kitchen, she woke up in Hyunjae's apartment and realized the hum was gone. Just gone. He was already awake beside her, reading something on his phone, one hand resting on her back. He felt her stir and looked over. Sleep well? He asked. Yes, she replied, surprised by how true it was. He went back to his phone. She lay there in the quiet morning light of his apartment. This life she had stumbled into through a hospital corridor and a folded piece of paper and a man who didn't flinch, and felt something she didn't immediately have a word for. It took her a moment. It was peace. Ji-yeon found out 3 weeks later. She was terrifyingly perceptive and had apparently been watching her brother watch Grace for months. I knew, she announced over dinner, pointing her chopsticks at both of them. From the second corridor visit. He never comes back to the second floor. There's nothing on the second floor he needs. There's a very good vending machine, Hyunjae said calmly. You don't use vending machines. I was expanding my horizons. Ji-yeon turned to Grace with an expression of profound solidarity. He talked about you. He pretended he wasn't, but he was. He mentioned your name 4 times in 1 week without realizing it. Ji-yeon. 5 times, actually. I counted. Grace looked at Hyunjae. He was looking at his food. Grace started laughing. 5 times, Grace said. She laughed until her eyes watered. He proposed on a Tuesday. No grand gesture. No restaurant chosen for its lighting or its reputation. They were in her apartment. Her small Mapogu apartment that she had never quite finished decorating because some part of her had always been ready to leave at short notice. He was sitting on her floor, helping her finally hang the painting she had bought 3 months ago and never mounted because the walls felt too temporary. He had the drill. She had the measuring tape. They had been arguing pleasantly about centimeters for 20 minutes. Then he put the drill down, reached into his jacket pocket, set a ring on the floor between them. Grace stared at it. You said you couldn't give me everything. I'm telling you again, you're enough. exactly as you are. Whatever comes after this, we figure it out together. But I'm done figuring out my life without you in it. She looked at the ring.
Then at him.
This man who had found her in a corridor holding a piece of paper that she thought had ended her story before it began. This man who had brought her coffee and learned her music and held her face while she fell apart in his kitchen and never once made her feel like a woman with limitations. He had made her feel like her younger self again. You're still impossible, she whispered. Consistently, he agreed. She picked up the ring. They married in the spring.
Small.
Intentional. Ji-yeon cried through the entire ceremony and denied it fiercely afterward. Grace's mother flew in from Lagos and spent the first 10 minutes assessing Hyunjae with the focused energy of a woman who had raised a daughter alone and was not about to hand her to someone unworthy. By the end of the evening, she had taught him 3 Igbo phrases and declared him acceptable in a tone that left no room for interpretation. Hyunjae received this verdict with complete seriousness and immediately asked her to teach him a 4th phrase. Grace watched them from across the room, her mother laughing, her husband leaning in attentively, the 2 most important people in her world occupying the same space, and felt the last piece of something settle into place. A year later, Grace fell pregnant. Unexpectedly. Against the odds the report had laid out in clinical, unforgiving language. Against everything she had prepared herself to accept. One morning, one test, one line that shouldn't have been there. She sat on the bathroom floor for a long time. When she came out, Hyunjae was in the kitchen, making coffee, unhurried, completely ordinary, and she walked straight to him and put the test on the counter, without a word.
He looked at it.
Then at her. She watched his face move through something she had never seen on it before. All that control, all that careful stillness, it didn't hold. His eyes went bright. He pulled her into him without speaking. She pressed her face against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. Fast, unguarded, real, and thought about a girl at 21 who had walked out of a clinic believing that was the end of something. It wasn't the end. It was just the long way to the beginning. Some people spend their whole lives running from the thing they're most afraid to want. Grace Obi ran for 6 years and walked straight into it anyway through a hospital corridor on an ordinary afternoon in Seoul. She didn't find him because she was ready. She found him because she was finally too tired to keep pretending she didn't deserve to be found. So tell me, do you believe some people are placed in your path exactly when you need them most? Or do you think Grace should have told him the truth from the very first corridor conversation? And the real question, when he said stay, was that the most romantic thing you've ever heard or the most terrifying? Drop your answers below. This comment section belongs to you. If this story moved something in you, like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. New stories drop every week, and every single one is built for people who feel things deeply. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. We'll see you in the next one.